All good? Hey, everybody. Let's start this. How's your Derbycon going? Awesome. Get ready to see a really depressing talk. So I want to start out thanking, the organizers for picking me, and love Derbycon, love speaking here. So thanks to them and all the volunteers and everybody else. So I usually start out this presentation with a little story about myself and volume. I can stand closer to it. This is going to be really awkward the whole time. All right. So about 8 years ago, I was married. At the time I had, 2 kids living in a really shitty house in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. My second son was about 1. My oldest was 7. Our roof leaked. The house was a disaster. And without going into too many details of my marriage, I didn't really have control over anything that was happening to me at the time. So that being said, I remember the one night I finally realized something was kind of wrong with me more than what I already knew was wrong with me. I just got out of the shower, was getting ready for bed, and throughout the day, I just had been getting progressively sadder for no reason, right? Nothing happened. It was just, I could tell, throughout the day I was getting sadder. And, I got out of the shower, sat down on the floor and bawled my eyes out. No reason. I was just laying there, just bawling my eyes out for an hour. My husband came up to me and I couldn't tell him why I was crying. I couldn't physically speak. And this image is probably the closest representation I can have of what was going on in my head at the time. It was just super fuzzy. I could not force myself physically to speak about it. And it actually hurt when I tried. I felt like the world was ending and there was nothing I could do to stop it. So all that static in my mind, and it took about a half hour to an hour for me to stop crying and actually get my first sentence out. And it was the stupidest thing ever. And I hate to use the word triggered, but what kind of tipped me over the edge was that my shower curtain was dirty. And stupidest thing ever, right? To just sit there and bawl your eyes out about, right? So at that point, I feel that's probably not a normal reaction, right? Not everybody sits there and cries with their shower curtain. So I felt so stupid and immature, and looking back at it now, a lot of the anxiety problems I had was because of the environment I was in, and lack of cleanliness. That in itself is a whole other book of stories. And the funny thing is, even when I realized something was wrong internally, I didn't ask for help. I've made it to the ripe age of 25 and handled everything on my own already, right? So why do I need to ask for help now? I should be able to handle that on my own. So why am I bringing this up at an Infosec con? First and foremost, this community is my family. More so than most blood relation that I have. And it's the first group of people that really, truly get me. You struggled with a lot of the same stuff growing up. And, after I started tweeting and posting about this stuff and talking to people, I realized how much of a kind of epidemic anxiety and depression and a lot of different mental health issues are in our community. And there's a lot of people that aren't just coping or whatever, but they're really struggling with this kind of stuff and trying to tackle it on their own, kind of like I did for 10 years or so, trying to get through all of that just by mentally thinking I could handle it myself. I've had amazing conversations with some super smart people that have also struggled with this and more. And I think that, usually when I give a talk, I'll retire it after I give it 2 or 3 times, right? They're recorded, they're online, you can go watch them, whatever. But this one just keeps on having people have such a positive reaction, after it's done, even though it is really super depressing until I get to the end. So I'm just going to keep on giving it until they tell me no. So looking back on my own life, after I finally got some help and, struggling with it since my teens, and it got just progressively worse, but it was always there. We never want to admit something's wrong with us, right? What is the first step of any 12-step program? Admitting you have a problem, accepting it, right? But if you admit it, accept it, and stop there, you're not really going to get any better. You're just going to make yourself more depressed because now you know that you have a problem and you're not going to do anything about it. You have to, actually go further than that and be a little bit more proactive in the care. And so not only do people in our industry have the normal everyday stresses of like a job, family, like everybody else does, but so many of us are extremely passionate about what we do that you're going to be like, how many of you have been like sitting working on a problem for 12 to 24 hours behind your computer, not talking to anybody, just pounding away, no physical interaction, no, human connection. You're just like pounding away because you're passionate about it, or you have to do it. And it's not just our 9-to-5 job anymore. It's our career, our passion, our hobby. None of you are here because you have to be. Well, I hope you're not. Otherwise, sorry. That would suck. The Infosec community is difficult to compare to any other, and we know this. We're composed of intelligent, driven, opinionated individuals that when you combine the pressure and stress that we put on ourselves in the form of research and teaching and learning and just trying to advance ourselves as individuals, it starts to build up, because then we also take it on from our bosses and our coworkers and our family, and it just comes at us in all these different forms. And also, like, the majority of roles that we fill to cater like our drive and willingness does sit us behind keyboards for hours at a time. And you can add to that roles like incident response, where you might be tracking down pedophiles, or helping with law enforcement, or doing some really, really messed up stuff. Maybe you can't talk that up. You're under an NDA, or you're, in some kind of government work where you can't talk about it to anybody. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the research I was able to do next. When I first thought about tackling this topic, I went to Google. First thing I searched for was mental health issues in STEM fields. And holy cow, most of them were about women. So after removing women as a search term, it went from 6 million articles down to 2 million. But when it comes to mental illness, we're different when it comes to the different sexes. Women are more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety or depression, and men tend toward like substance abuse or antisocial disorders. But nobody wants to talk about the men, right? They always want to talk about the minorities in Infosec, even though you make up 70% of the industry. I'm not going to try and focus on you guys, but you're the ones not really talking about it. Otherwise, there'd be more articles online. But the hypothesis I was trying to prove is that it seemed like people in STEM had a higher rate of mental health issues, which turns out there's actually a few studies that support that. One's called the Savannah IQ interaction hypothesis, and I honestly read way more medical studies and research than I thought I would ever do. It's not my field, right? I do blue team stuff. Why would I be reading medical journals? But the quote that I like from this, and this is some of the research they put into this, they say, the finding of an association between progressively increasing risk of bipolar disorder and high arithmetic intellectual performance is rather surprising. They explain that the arithmetic test requires not only mathematical skill, but rapid information processing for the purpose of successfully completing a timed exam. High scorers with such rapid processing power may also share a tendency to experience mania, a state of high focus, and psychomotor activity. So it also talks about something that I thought people with higher intelligence tend to self-medicate more, and that's also in that Savannah IQ paper, with drugs and more than the drugs and alcohol more than the average person. So Mr. Robot fans. All right, awesome. I'm not going to do too many spoilers, but those of you who have not watched it, the main character, Elliot, suffers from social anxiety disorder, clinical depression, delusions, paranoia, and he self-medicates with morphine. And he uses Suboxone to bring himself back down from the withdrawals. And while I don't really recommend that at all, it's basically the gist of that paper, you know, that a lot of smart people are good at self-medicating. Yeah. So let's move on to some more statistics. Not only does that Savannah IQ talk about this smarts to depression correlation, there's actually a study done recently at Berkeley that found between 42 and 48% of PhD students in science and engineering are depressed. That's compared to like 7% of the like normal population, right? So that's a huge difference, which makes sense on the Google results. There were significantly more results involving women because, one, we report it more, and two, people like to focus on minorities. And this is some of the other statistics that Berkeley paper had. So, what I said, it's not like you guys aren't having issues. Believe me, I've met lots of you. You're just not reporting them. Some more U.S. statistics. And this is, I mean, definitely something that I struggle with. All of this, and we still think that, you know, the person sitting next to us has it better together than we do ourselves. I know I'm guilty of it. A handful of people have already given talks about, like, impostor syndrome, and that can go hand in hand with a lot of mental health issues that we have. So if you don't know, impostor syndrome is like that feeling that you shouldn't be getting paid to do what you're doing, or you shouldn't even be doing what you're doing because you just don't think you're smart enough. People shouldn't be letting you do what you're doing because you're not smart enough. And a lot of times that's, you know, how we see ourselves when we have thoughts of like suicide or have anxiety. You feel like you're drowning while everybody around you has their shit together. I know I can think of a good amount of people that have talked me through situations like that I've been having, as well as all of the times I've been limited because of my the anxiety problems that I have. I found this one recommendation. It's from the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. They actually recommend that all adults be screened for depression. All of us. That's like astounding to think of, that it's that big of an epidemic that they want all of us to be screened for it. And when I read that, like, my mind went in just like a million different directions. Like, all right, is it just U.S. citizens, or do they want like the whole world to be like screened for depression? Is it our diet, our government, probably our government? But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we don't really have it that bad, right? But that doesn't, like, total first world problems. You know, we shouldn't be sad about anything, but that doesn't really help when you're like cuddled, like in the corner crying. So I'm going to dive into the different types of mental health issues and their characteristics. I'm not going to cover everything because that would take all day, but I'll cover some of the more common ones that we see and that we hear about. I want to talk about these the diseases. Pay attention, because a lot of them, a lot of the issues are going on inside your brain, right? But there are also a lot of serious physical issues happening as well that manifest themselves. So in a few of the slides, I use these. I love these images. I think 2 years ago, his name's Sean Koss. He's actually from Akron, and was one of the original artists for Cyanide and Happiness. And he has this whole series where he did just mental health issues for Inktober. And they're really super cool, and, like, I've never met him or don't really, like, plug him or anything, but he has, like, prints and stuff of all this kind of stuff on his website, which is pretty neat. So first, this is social anxiety disorder. That's me. Some common symptoms, fear of situations in where you might be judged, worrying about embarrassing or humiliating yourself, concerns that you'll offend someone, intense fear of interacting or talking with strangers, fear of physical symptoms that cause you embarrassment, like blushing, sweating, trembling, having a shaky voice, you know, all of the, like, flushed face, whatever. Avoiding doing things or speaking to people out of fear of embarrassment, and avoiding situations where you might be the center of attention, which I don't know how I get up on stage with that. You have anxiety in anticipation of a feared event. And this is one that I'm really, really guilty of, spending time after a social situation, like bit by bit analyzing all of your performance and all of the words that you've said, and, you know, your body language and everything that has gone on in that situation. Like, I gave this talk at B-Sides Wellington in New Zealand, because one of the organizers also struggles a lot. So they had me over there to talk about this. And it was the first time I had ever left the country. So, like, that was kind of freaking me out, right? And like, one of the things that I realized I was doing was, so they drive on the other side of the road, the wrong side of the road there. And like, when you're, I don't know if anybody else does this, it might just be me because I'm crazy. When you're walking, like, down the aisle of a supermarket or, like, down the sidewalk, I do it like I'm driving a car, right? You're on the right side. That's how you're supposed to walk, right? Or that's how my brain says I'm supposed to walk. I made a huge, huge conscious effort in New Zealand to walk on the opposite side of the sidewalk, because I didn't want them thinking, oh, look at that stupid foreigner. She doesn't know how to walk on our sidewalks, which is completely irrational. But you know, that stuff still goes through my head. As I go through this one and the ones later, you might say that, like, to yourself that, you know, these things happen to you every now and then. But a lot of these specify that these are intense fears, like fears that never go away, are always on the top of your mind for the most part. I know I'm not a doctor, but if you experience, this is my fast talking, you know, small print. But if you experience these or any other symptoms I cover, definitely don't hesitate to go get help. It definitely won't hurt to do so, and I'll talk a little bit more about kinds of help and stuff later. Other things with anxiety, you might avoid certain social situations, using public bathrooms, interacting with strangers, eating in front of others. I actually used to work with somebody that had to eat at her desk. Couldn't, like, go to the cafeteria or out to eat with anybody because she could not chew in front of people. So I mean, that kind of stuff really can limit yourself, like, socially. Making eye contact, initiating conversations. Dating, I can tell you that, as I try to think I'm not a moron, but dating in your 30s in small town America is its own separate kind of hell. But adding anxiety to that, and it's pretty much impossible. Attending parties, social like this is me too, like, constantly. I just, like, oh, I don't have my kids tonight. I'm going to look for something to do. I find all these cool things. Like, nah, I'll just work. All right, I'll stay at home and work. Going to work or school, returning items to a store, calling people on the phone, all of that kind of stuff falls in with anxiety. I'll let you read this while I drink. So I don't know how many relationships I've ruined because of my panic and anxiety attacks. And I don't just mean, like, romantic relationships, right? I mean friendships, all that kind of stuff. Anything that's not a business relationship, right? Because I'll like overinvest myself, and I'll, think I'm pushing people away, or, just all these crazy scenarios go on in my brain, and I just like, oh, well, they hate me now, and, that's how everybody feels about me, and I might as well just like stop talking to them because now they hate me and it doesn't matter. But again, that's like just me talking. That's my brain doing crazy stuff. But people have different levels of anxiety like that, and they deal with different symptoms. And the stuff that I talk about now isn't, that might not be how the next person has anxiety issues or whatever. But a big common theme is overthinking and being around people. Next up is depression. It's definitely the most talked about mental health issue out there. Many people will associate this with just being sad, or just like going through a rough patch or whatever. But it's way, way more than that. So according to a recent WHO study, depression is the leading cause of physical illness in the world. You have things like feelings of sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, hopelessness. You'll get angry outbursts, irritability, frustration. You lose interest in the things that you might have once really enjoyed. Sleep disturbances like insomnia or sleeping too much, not physically being able to get out of bed. Tiredness, lack of energy, all that kind of stuff. Changes in appetite, weight loss, weight gain. Anxiety a lot of times goes along with depression. Slowed thinking, speaking, or body movements. Feelings of worthlessness or guilt, and you fixate on past failures, blaming yourself, even, if it's totally not your fault. It's still in your head, it totally was. You have trouble thinking and concentrating, working on projects, remembering things, making decisions, frequent recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal thoughts, attempts at suicide, unexplained physical problems like back pain or headaches. And we hear about that a lot, right? I mean, once a week you hear about someone killing themselves because of depression, right? At least once a week. Like, it's been an issue for a long time, and it's been something that nobody wants to talk about for a long time. So next up is super fun. This is called bipolar disorder, as previously known as manic depression. And there's two sides of this one. First off is like the manic side, where you're abnormally upbeat and jumpy, increased activity, you're super pumped about everything, you have like this euphoric self-confidence, you're just the shit. Like, you are just the best thing that's ever happened. You don't sleep, talk a bunch, distractibility, racing thoughts, poor decision making is a huge one. Like going on buying sprees, taking sexual risks, making foolish investments. And then the second part is all the things that we just talked about in depression. That's the down part of that bipolar. Next up is PTSD. So it's a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event. So either experiencing it or witnessing it, and you'll have recurrent, unwanted, distressing memories of that event. A lot of times, it's definitely associated with our military. You also get this with, sexual assault, seeing, super violent things happening, that kind of stuff. Will definitely cause PTSD. You'll have flashbacks and upsetting dreams or nightmares about the traumatic event. So I did my best to add as many funny memes because I told you this is super depressing. You get severe emotional distress or physical reactions to something that reminds you of the event. Next up is borderline personality disorder. So this is also called dissociative identity disorder, and it impacts the way that you think about yourself and others, and it causes problems in everyday life. So you have unstable, intense relationships. You have a distorted self-image, intense fear of abandonment. People will even go to extreme measures to avoid like this imagined separation, they have with these people in their head. They end up having a lot of unstable, intense relationships. One moment they'll like idolize someone, and the next moment they'll want to like actually murder them. Rapid changes in self-identity, shifting goals and values, that kind of stuff. And shifts between the different personalities often are accompanied by like blackout periods. Does anybody read the Dark Tower series? All right, not the movie. Read it, right? Movie sucked. And one of the main characters in the book actually has multiple personality disorder. And they do a really, really good job of explaining it because she'll black out. The two personalities have no idea about each other. And you'll like totally lose contact with reality. Let's see here. Wild mood swings, that kind of stuff. So I was looking into like some really crazy bad types of schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. And one of the worst cases that has ever been documented is this little 7-year-old girl named Janie, and she was diagnosed in 2009. And she had hallucinations of imaginary children and animals. All right, and she had this little girl that was her friend named 24 Hours. She had a rat named Wednesday, a cat named 400, and all of them tell her to do bad things, and said if she didn't do it, they would scratch and bite her until she did. So her parents, they had so she was 7, and then she had a little brother. Her parents had divorced, and they had to stay in the same house because she would attempt to like kill her baby brother. So they had to sleep in shifts. So someone was always awake and with her. And she's 7. Like that's honestly one of the worst cases I think that I've read about. And his name was Michael, was a college English professor, said that he was like her therapist. He's met more than 200 of her cats, rats, dogs, friends, whatever, that only she can see. And she was super self-harming. She had already attempted suicide several times by age 7, and extremely violent towards everybody else because she thought these animals were actually going to hurt her if she didn't perform these terrible acts. Next up is Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder. So this features a pattern of unreasonable thoughts and fears, which are the obsessions, right? That lead you to do repetitive behaviors, which are the compulsions. So a couple really famous people that had OCD, one was Nikola Tesla. He would actually have to walk around a building 3 times before entering it. He would not eat alone with women, had an intense fear of circle-shaped objects, and had to have everything divisible by 3. There was a case in the 1800s of this lady that would compulsively wash her hands, like 200, like I feel like I have germophobia, right? But she would compulsively wash her hands 200 times a day due to fear of like contamination of things. Also in the 1800s was Joanna H. She was obsessed with the idea that she was going to cheat on her husband. She was completely happy in her marriage, like had no will to want to do this, but you could walk up to her and tell her that she had cheated on her husband and she would just believe you on the spot. It got so bad that her and her husband created this chastity belt that only her husband had the key for, so she would know, when it was off, and he's the only one that had the key. You have a fear of contamination or dirt. It's not, when people say, oh, I have OCD because I like things in spreadsheets and using sharp pencils or something. I don't know. You probably don't have OCD. This is super intense, right? This is going to end up probably disrupting your day-to-day activities. You need things orderly and symmetrical. You'll have aggressive and horrific thoughts about harming yourself or others. It's me yesterday. So we can all agree, like, having one of these can royally suck. if not more, right? A lot of people have more than one. So now what? Like, what if you or someone you know are experiencing one or more of these? Like, how do you cope, and how do you help them cope? So a while back, it's been like a year or so now, I put out this survey asking about 20 different questions on people's perception of their like personal ideas around like surrounding mental health. It was, I don't know, 20 question survey, just people that followed me on Twitter did it. I think I had over 800 responses, so it was a decent sampling size, right? So several of the survey responses kind of pointed out what I talked to earlier about the Savannah IQ interaction hypothesis. One of the questions was, do you participate in any activities to reduce, dull, or improve the stress or feelings you're having, such as alcohol, prescription drugs, other drugs, exercise, medication, or other? One of after 50 or so people had filled out the survey, I realized, a couple people pointed it out actually, that I didn't make this multiple answer. It was multiple choice and then other. They're like, I do all of those things. Like, I wish I could have answered all. And then I had anxiety because I fucked that up. It's just this chain reaction. So out of the 860 responses, these were the results. So we have that little other, where is that? Other category where 70 people answered, right? My favorite responses out of this one, and some of them you'll see, we have the mental health and wellness village down there near the catwalk. So there's kind of the same how do you deal with stress question on there. But some of my favorite answers for the other category were pretend to be a Vulcan, cats, masturbation, and Twitter. I don't know how Twitter solves anything. You could probably put all four of those things together. If you're really determined, you could put all the four of those together. So there's a lot of different coping and relaxation methods out there that can help with this kind of stuff, including medicine. And here you see, the earlier hypothesis at work in the form of booze and drugs. When I started researching this kind of stuff, I reached out to a friend of mine who actually does mental health counseling for his day job. And he said, the quickest way to improve your brain chemistry is moving around. Who can tell me the two best ways to improve your brain chemistry without doing drugs? Exercise is one of them. Sex. But only if you're doing it right. So then I go right to talking about my mom. This is not Freudian at all. I use my mom as a sounding board for a lot of the stuff that I like to talk about on stage, whether it's technical or not, which is great because I love making her laugh or cringe or shake her head at me all the time. And when I started talking about different coping mechanisms, she, prescription drugs, all that kind of stuff, she mentioned her great-grandma. And I guess she had been institutionalized because she was sad and withdrawn around 55 or so. So she was going through menopause and she probably had depression. And for treatment at that time, she was just given regular shock treatments. Because, there's nothing like trying to solve your menopause and depression, just shocking the hell out of you. That's really going to fix it. But now we have better options. People talk. I had to formally apologize for the slide once. But I'm still keeping it there, so take that. So now we have better options, right? People talk about safe spaces while making fun of millennials. But I think we can agree that the most people out there don't really need safe spaces, but it would be nice to have somebody to talk to if you needed it. Even if you don't use anything as a coping mechanism, it can still feel good to externalize all the thoughts that you have in your head and feelings that are going on, without being judged and mocked. Back then you couldn't talk about mental health at all, right? It was super taboo to talk about. It still kind of is, it's still kind of stigmatized. Just like that had to been like early 1900s, I'd imagine. Just like you couldn't talk about divorce or teen pregnancy or anything like that. And yeah, I got all three of those. So not only can you talk to people in your field about your research and that kind of stuff, but you can talk to them about your thoughts and feelings and be all mushy and gushy. Anything else that you should want to. But hey, lots of people want professional opinions too. You know, if I know so many people that find such comfort and help by going to therapists or counselors or whatever, talking to somebody that actually has a lot, like, I'm not a counselor, right? I just did a little bit of research. There's people that actually have doctorates and stuff for this kind of stuff, that are fantastic to talk to. I know people that go to therapists once a month. Some people go like several times a week, whatever works for you. And finding a good therapist is also something that some people struggle with. You're like, oh, well, there's a therapist right down the street. I'll go down there, right? If you don't connect with that person, that's not going to be a great experience for you. Shop around. You're going there for your health, right? It doesn't matter if I don't imagine you'd hurt their feelings by moving on. You never know. But you need to find somebody that you can connect with and talk to openly about the stuff that's going on. So back to getting all doped up. The last 20 years, there's been a 400% increase in the use of antidepressants, with an estimated 1 in 10 adults taking them now. Now, you don't need to devaluate people's suffering. You also don't want to be too quick to throw pills at people, for which, you might be able to do non-medical solutions for, right? Which is great that people are meditating and exercising, hacking, learning, and getting themselves off with Vulcan and stuff to relieve some of the stress. A good amount of those are increasing your dopamine. A good amount of those things increase your dopamine levels automatically without the need of anything clinical. When I was first prescribed Zoloft, this is the kind of explanation that I received. It's just a simple chemical reaction in my brain that isn't pumping out what it needs to. We can give you some medication. It's gonna fix it. Which, heck, I took that as gospel because logically, on the surface, it made sense. Something biological isn't firing quite right, and to release the right chemicals, the meds will fix it. So during my research, I realized that that's not 100% true. What I found in medical journals and articles, they really have no idea why some of these medications work. It's all right. I get that science is hard. The studies point out that things also arise, like faulty mood regulation by the brain, genetic vulnerabilities, stressful life events, other medications or other medical problems. There's actually a American Psychological Association article that says, we do not dispute the possibility that neurotransmitters and other brain chemicals play a significant role in the etiology of depression. However, we are concerned that the chemical imbalance explanation may not reflect the full range of causes of depression, may be given greater credence by both consumers and practitioners than is supported by sound research, and or may be understood in an overly simplistic manner. But really, what part of any medical science do we not receive in an overly simplistic manner? Just like when we're talking to our customers, for the most part, you're dumbing that down. They're doing the same thing to us because, one, do we really care about some of us do. Do we really care about all the super specific stuff? No, they have you in there for a 20-minute appointment or whatever. They're trying to get you the gist of it without you having to stay there for hours to explain all of it. So I started taking Zoloft about 6 months or so between the end of my marriage, and it was amazing. I wasn't sad anymore. I had more energy. I thought it was amazing, but it kind of made me a zombie. It was great at propelling me through a lot of stress in the next 2 years with moving, divorce, several job changes. Because in all honesty, I didn't really have any emotions at all. It's nothing better than having, zero emotions when you're trying to handle stressful life events. Has anybody ever seen The Magicians? Yeah. There's an episode where they take all their feeling, like there's a spell or whatever, take all their feelings and they put this in this bottle, right? And they wear it around their neck. It was just like that. Like, couldn't cry, couldn't care less about anything. I was just like going through my day, not happy, not sad, just zombie, like no feelings, dead inside. So after all the major stresses in my life had died down, I realized that it would kind of be nice to feel some sort of emotion again. Instead, I was like trying to fill that hole in my soul or heart or stomach or whatever with probably really unhealthy things instead. And it takes a little bit of a self-reflection to realize that you might be going down a really bad path, and to kind of correct that. So I changed to Wellbutrin and like the occasional Xanax, or if I can't find that, usually 2 bottles of wine works. Which for me has worked out incredibly well so far, like super low side effects compared to other things, whatever. I'm not saying that everybody should be medicated, but sometimes it's really nice. And I bet you there are people that are coping in way unhealthier ways, that could really benefit from something like that. So what other coping mechanisms are there to possibly work on? So even properly medicated mental health can be a struggle sometimes. I listened to a podcast called The Hilarious World of Depression. And during one of the episodes, one of the guests talks about dealing with her anxiety by naming it Steve. And then she just imagines Steve as this dumb friend in her brain that keeps on telling her that she's shit and that she's doing the stupid things and all this kind of stuff. She's like, oh, Steve, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's actually that kind of coping mechanism that they teach children that have anxiety. Because at that point, it's kind of like just a little imagination game. You can give your problems a name and like beat it down however you want. Other times crying. Even if you haven't chosen to do it, it helps. I found this really cool. There's an actual biochemist tear expert. His name's Dr. William Frey at the Ramsey Medical Center in Minneapolis. And he discovered that reflex tears are 98% water, whereas emotional tears also contain stress hormones, which get excreted through your body from crying. So he studied like the actual composition of different reasons people are crying, and crying actually through his research, found that crying actually stimulates the production of endorphins, which is our body's natural painkiller, and the feel-good hormones. I've also personally used breathing exercises, binaural beats, other meditation, yoga, that kind of stuff. And it's something called the 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique. So like if I feel myself having like a panic attack, like really freaking out, you can do this. So if you want, you can walk through this with me. It's totally up to you. Just try something new. So 5 is you acknowledge 5 things around you that you can see. However big or small, whatever, chair beside you, lights up above, whatever, and actually list them in your mind, like 5 things you can see. Acknowledge 4 things around you that you can touch. Ask first. You don't want to get all handsy while we're in here. Maybe it's your computer, your chair, your lanyard, your hair, whatever. 3 is acknowledge 3 things around you that you can hear. Obviously, I'm going to be one of them, as I'm standing up here rambling, the lights buzzing, people outside talking, whatever. Fine-tune those and see if you can find ambient noise that you wouldn't normally hear. 2, another one that might be sketchy here. Acknowledge 2 things around you that you can smell. I hope you've all had your shower. So you can check how your neighbor smells, I guess. But if not, go outside, smell the fresh air or the smog or whatever, people smoking, coffee, soap, whatever you can find. And then the last one can go 2 different ways. I've seen where people will either acknowledge one positive thing about yourself, or you could acknowledge one thing that you can taste. So go get a drink of water, put some gum in your mouth, whatever, like something like that. And that positive thinking can help bring like a positive feeling back up in yourself. And then finally at level 1, go through maybe some breathing exercises. I'm going to have to crank through these. So now that we've covered a bunch of my personal baggage and different coping mechanisms, I'm going to look how we can actually help others. Open communication. So since I try and talk about this stuff openly, I've gotten a huge range of responses from people. Now that I can tell, for the most part, when I have an anxiety attack coming on, I can verbalize it more than I used to be able to. Like, I can kind of spot the warning signs myself. But some of the common negative things that you don't want to say to somebody that might be having problems is this. And I'm not the only ones that have heard this, through all the talking I've done to people. I have heard that. They've said a lot of that kind of stuff. I get this a lot, and I truly do have a whole lot going for me, right? I have a wonderful family, great job, published author, great podcasts. Woo! How could I be depressed, right? I don't have the right to be depressed. But you know what? I've caught myself saying the exact same thing to people I think have their shit together better than I do. And they tell me, well, I've struggled with depression. I'm like, what? Yeah. So I've caught myself doing the same thing. But, some of the things that we can tell people, oh wait, that's not yet. More don't says. So I only wish that kind of stuff were possible, just to say, why don't you stop being sad? You just can't will yourself when you might have a chemical imbalance or something other, some other potential reason why your brain's firing a different way. It can be really easy to put the happy face on the outside, but that doesn't mean any of the inside issues go away. Like we covered before, a lot of them can physically manifest themselves. Not only have I gotten both positive and negative stories around interactions of mental health, but almost everyone I've talked to in the last couple years, people have been surprised when they've actually come out and talked about it. Here's some things that you can say. I'm going to go through these quick. And something that really works for me, I've given people like mental health safety words, like pineapple or something like that, where if you need to get out of the situation you're in, you have your trusted person, you say something, you do something, and they know kind of like what to do to help you get out of there. No, I'm just going to go through these because I'm running out of time, and I want you to watch a video. So I want to tell you about a couple of things that our community is already doing. One, I think this is technically, it's the first one I have heard of, the first mental health, village workshop that I've seen yet. So please go check it out. Like, we're having, thank you. So yeah, that's made me like really super happy. It's going really well. And we have like our own talks and stuff in there. And I'm actually going to Germany in November to run the same thing, which I'm super psyched about. And this is fantastic. Rob, we're going to watch this little video, and I hope audio works.
All right, here goes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Rob Fuller, and I'm a hacker. Now, every single one of you watching probably has a different definition of what that might be. But I guarantee not a single one of those definitions includes race, creed, color, religion, sexual preference, or anything in between. The hacker community is filled with human beings, people from all walks of life. In our community, like any social community, there are people among us, friends, acquaintances, con buddies that have problems that many of you might not even know they have. We have lost too many of those friends to suicide, drugs, alcohol, depression, and crime. Many of us dove into the world of computers and the internet because it was a place of acceptance. But there's a dark side to this world. It is too easy to disconnect, to miss those markers when all you see is what someone tweets or IMs. You can't see when you hurt, when you cry. There are many ways to help us that need it and are afraid to ask because one of the biggest biases we still have in our community is showing weakness. But you can let those around you know you care, that you are there for them, and the door is open to talk anytime. But one of the best ways is just to be around each other, hang out, go to a movie, have a good time, talk about your day. To be a true friend, not just another face in a lobby of a conference. If you wish to join me in this fight, please make a video. Or just tell your friends, your con buddies, or your acquaintances that you just see at that LobbyCon that we are all hacking together.
All right. So let's do some hacking together. My doors, my DM, anything's open if you ever want to talk. I'm going to not go through all these. Here's a whole bunch of information. I also have these on little magnets in the mental health village that you can come pick up for free. And I'd like to end this with a picture of a cute puppy because I told you how depressing this is. So ta-da! And that's it. So if anybody has any questions, we probably don't have time for questions, right? Just meet me in the mental health village.